Where is the baby?
The Holler Kings, where the horror's Southern fried.
Holla.
I'm Craig.
And I'm Adam.
And we're the Holler Kings.
The motherfucking Holler Kings.
It's all true. And we have a guest today. This is Mr. Chad Crawford Kinkle.
Hey, how's it going?
A horror writer and director.
Editor, just about does it all, right?
Everything, kind of.
Dip in a little bit of catering transpo as well.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Offended immediately.
Damn it. No.
Table flip. No, thank you so much for coming out. So we really appreciate it. You're very specific to this podcast because it's about Southern themed horror. And to the best of my knowledge, you are from Tennessee, correct?
Yeah. I grew up in a small town called Fayetteville, Tennessee. That's actually pronounced Fedville by the locals.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So it's like, 30,000 people in the entire county type thing.
And your first two features shot here in Tennessee.
Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. They were both shot here.
Jugface and Dementer.
Yeah, Jugface and Dementer. And then my newest feature that I'm editing right now was shot in Alaska, which is completely different.
Right. You picked this movie that we're going to talk about.
I did. One of my favorites.
This is The Other from 1972.
Holland, where is the baby?
For the Perrys of New England, terrible things began to happen that summer.
Holland, where is the baby?
There were secret terrors, secret places. But the most frightening secret of all is yet to come.
Oh, my God.
From the shocking bestseller, 20th Century Fox presents a new concept of terror and madness. The Other.
Holland, where is the baby?
The Other from 20th Century Fox. Rated PG. Parental guidance suggested.
Tell us why you brought this to the table.
Let's see. I was introduced to this film in 99, I guess. I was going to school in New York. I was getting my master's at the New School studying film. And before, actually, my undergrad was from SCAD, the Savannah College of Art and Design. And that's kind of when I first studied film. And I had gone to Europe with like my 4 best friends who were all filmmakers. And we were going to different cities. And we were actually in Budapest in a hostel. And we were drinking, and I just met some guy, and I was saying, I want to go and learn like theory, like film theory, and because SCAD was definitely more technical skills than wasn't that much theory, and the guy was like, oh man, you should go to. And I was telling him I like horror movies. That's what I want to study. And he was like, oh, you should go to the New School because there's a professor there and all he teaches is like horror movies. And I was just like, I'm going there. Cool. I never heard of the New School, but the New School is like part of Parsons. Inside the Actor Studio was from the New School for many, many years. So actually when I graduated, James Lipton, the host for the Inside the Actor Studio.
If heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
He gave the speech or whatever, which was totally hilarious. He wasn't trying to be hilarious; it just was. I go to the New School. I immediately meet this professor. His name's John Freitas, and he had done some ghostwriting, and he was, of course, very knowledgeable of horror movies. And I took classes that he did on like Italian horror and just different things. And I don't even remember which class I learned about this movie in, but that was like I saw it then. I was like, oh, I really love this movie. And so it's just kind of always stuck with me. So, and it's a movie that I don't think many people have seen, and so I like to bring it up.
I never even heard of it until you brought it to to our attention.
Yeah. I had heard of it, but I Not even come close. I didn't know anything about it really. I just heard the title before. I think this is a slept-on one for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Well, it's older, and then it's like, as you've watched it, you're probably like, why am I watching this? Why did he mention this movie? Because it's so mundane in a way, but then I think it's very dark. It's almost like an extremely dark Disney movie. And that's why I love it. It's like, it seems like it's not going to be what it is, and it doesn't have to go to extremes to provide this story for you that to me, it just feels organic and just so dark. It's just it's just great.
Well, it's the Robert Mulligan as well, right? To Kill a Mockingbird.
Right, the director. Yeah,
right?
Yeah, definitely.
And unfortunately, I kind of realized that as soon as I started watching it. I was like, oh, I know who this is. And I couldn't help but see some of the parallels between To Kill a Mockingbird and the other, especially just with the direction of child actors and how natural they seem to me. But yeah, like it's also shot, even though it's the 70s, I feel like it does feel like a classic Hollywood, like it feels a little bit like Night of the Hunter or, To Kill a Mockingbird in the style a little bit. Mm-hmm. So it's almost like a color version of that era. Right. And it contrasts so well with some of the events that kind of unfold, right?
Yeah. And there is, like, of course, this is based on a novel. Mm-hmm. And I've read the novel as well. And, of course, the screenplay was written by the novelist. Mm-hmm. And the only difference, really, before we kind of start talking about the movie, is the setup. Like, in the novel, it's that whole false narrator type scenario where you're being it's Niles. Yeah, it's Niles. He's talking in the beginning, and you realize that he's in like a mental institution. Like, because he mentions a community room, and he's locked in this room by himself, and he's talking, and so he goes into the story, and then as we talk, there's a difference in the ending that's just subtle in the actual movie, which is more literal in the book.
Mm-hmm. Well, I had heard that Tom Tryon wasn't super thrilled with the results, that he felt like some things were miscast, and apparently like some of the shots were masters with no other angles to cut away to. Yeah, right. So they had to jettison some of them for just audience reaction, like test screenings where, people were fidgeting and everything. So they're like, well, let's just get rid of it. And he felt like some of those scenes were super important to the overall narrative.
Well, welcome to filmmaking. That's how it goes.
But even for you that, when you're like you're helming it, like you're writing and directing and editing.
Yeah.
Even then you have to kill some babies.
It's not even like you have to kill babies. Babies die left and right. Because it's like the script is like, the initial inspiration for it, and it's the guide for what you're trying to do. But then, where the rubber meets the road is when, you start to make the movie, and like really even like the casting affects the overall movie, like huge. It's so huge. Like, even with, like, my first feature, Jugface, which I thought we had a great cast, the script is much darker than the movie. Mm-hmm. They couldn't, as a group of actors, couldn't go as dark as I had written it, really.
Yeah.
Yeah, it needed to be lighter for them, which is kind of strange, but, like, I wrote it even darker than it is. Huh. And that was a real, because I've done shorts and stuff, and it's like those are simple things which have like a character or two, but you don't have a bunch of characters that kind of all together equal something that has a feeling, like a feature does. And so that was the first time I was like, oh damn, like casting is huge. And of course, when you see a movie and you don't think it works, and you're like, they shouldn't have cast this person in a role. That's like obvious, right? But when you realize the whole grouping together is what gives the movie a certain feeling. It's like you realize how powerful it is, and really with Jugface, I was like, oh my god, like they can't go where I really thought it should go. Which is fine. It became what it is, and so that's like your babies are always dying left and right. And it's not anything that's necessarily bad. It's just like, it's organic.
It evolves.
Yeah, it evolves from the script. Really, when you're writing the script, like when you come to the concept of like a movie, what you think it's going to be, it's not going to be that.
Right.
Like when you get to the end of the script, if you let it do what it wants to do, there's different like, movies and television shows that, like I love True Detective. And have you seen that on HBO?
I saw season 1.
Yeah, season 1. Yeah, me too. Yeah. And I loved it all up until the very ending. And it felt to me very shoehorned into that ending. And I read a thing about the writer later, and he said that was what he came up with first. So he made a mistake by not letting it evolve to the ending that it needed to go to. Instead, he let it be creative, and then he shoehorned it into that ending. And so it's just like this thing that it has to burn as it's developing, and the stuff that's not going to work just has to, transform to something new and just go away, So, and that happens in the screenplay.
Yeah.
You're always, and I mean, if you're not open to that, you can't get the happy accidents. Like even like with the screenplay, like I work from outline. That's like my main way I write, and because I've had too many screenplays and stories where they just die in the middle. And it's because you just don't know where it's going to go to, and it's just this trap of thinking, well, I can just come up with it as I go, and it'll just it just dies. So like with Jugface, there was a scene in it where the main character has gone. She's escaped, and she's come back, and Sustin, the father, is like whipped her, and now she's in the tub, and Loris, the mom, she's and I wrote it where she's just supposed to be doctoring the cuts, and they're supposed to just have a conversation, and as I'm writing it, in my mind I see that there's blood pooling in the bottom of the tub, and I think to myself immediately, oh man, she's having a miscarriage because of the trauma. That wasn't in the outline. And so I wrote that scene as I was feeling it right then. And those are the moments you realize, that's amazing. That's exactly what should happen right here. And it was always a part of the story after that, but it wasn't in my initial idea. But I let those things those weeds grow up because they're flowers actually, you need them.
Yeah, you kind of find those different versions of it as you go, because you make the movie in one writing the script, you make it again in production, and then you make it again in editing. You can kind of revolve it, almost remake it every time, and kind of evolve those.
To a certain degree, I mean, of course the script, and then when you go into production, like I said, the casting's huge, and then just every decision about it's just a bunch of decisions that add up to what you have in the end, and it's always a compromise. It's not a compromise. It's, I can't do this.
Right.
Or actually, we don't have, this location. It has to be this now. I mean, you're constantly dealing with all these things that are breaking down around you that were in the script that are not there anymore. So you got to figure out kind of on your feet how to hold the movie together with all these shifting pieces, all these babies dying everywhere,
Right.
There's too many crying dead babies, some are just going to go. And then, then you get into the edit, and you don't necessarily recreate the movie. There's a lot of options there that you can do that weren't in the script necessarily, telling it different ways. But yeah, that's like another whole creative, another phase of the organic creation of the movie, and even the sound is part of that. The sound is huge. They say it's half of the movie experience, and that's definitely true because it's just really powerful what you can do. The storytelling elements you can just do with sound.
Adam, how did you feel about this movie? This is your first time to see it, right?
I loved it.
Yeah.
I thought it was fantastic. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a cool kind of almost like a time capsule of that era and time, but that also kind of feels like y'all were talking a little, could be almost sort of, because it's set in 35, but was shot in the 70s, and it just has this kind of natural feel of just, I don't know, just Americana, I guess.
Yeah, that's why I picked it. I was trying to find a Southern horror movie, but I was like, this is like rural and just American. Yeah, Americana. Yeah. So that's why I felt like, oh, okay, this will work, even though it's not just set in the South. There's not any particular things that you find in Southern culture that's in it, other than a reference to the Civil War or something, that was in it. But
How about you give us just a brief synopsis of the movie?
let's see. Let me put me on the spot. It's about a character, boy, Niles, and as you watch the movie, he and his brother are getting into a bunch of mischief.
Hi guys, Craig here. I just wanted to note that there are some major spoilers upcoming for The Other. So if you want to check it out before you listen to the rest of the podcast, please track it down. It's worth watching for sure. Spoilers ahead for The Other.
You realize that his brother is murderous. Then you basically realize as you're watching it that there is no other brother, that it's him, he has a split personality, because of the death of his brother. And it's just about the reckoning of that and, seeing what happens,
Well, it's funny that, what a lot of people would call a twist is presented to us about an hour into the movie, which I think is really interesting that they don't try to punch out on that. Instead, they kind of recontextualize what you've just seen.
Right.
So the first hour of the movie becomes completely different, knowing, that was either A in his head or literally a ghost brother, right?
Yeah. Well, and that's what I like about it too. It feels like a ghost story, which
Right.
to me, ghosts have always been. A ghost is like it's obviously a haunting by somebody or something else, and that's the way memories are. So the fact that's like the memory of his brother, in his brain, is just like the perfect analogy for a real ghost. He's imagining it to be real, even though it's not real. It's not an actual ghost in a movie, but it feels like it. It's really cool.
But is it? So you're saying that it is some sort of, it's a construct of himself, it's his own, I don't know, mental health issues.
Particularly in the book. He's in a mental institution at that point, so it felt like to me it's a split personality. That he developed over the trauma of his brother dying, and his brother was like the bad, brother.
But okay, so this is me being the layperson that doesn't know anything about storytelling. I thought the movie showed the grandmother plays a game with the main child, where he can astral project himself into other beings, or there's a whole sequence where the two of them are playing this game, and he projects himself into a crow and flies over the fields and everything. I took that at face value.
Okay,
I was like, wow, so this kid has a power where he can, jump into a crow, and the grandmother understands, she's passed on this Russian, she's an immigrant
thing, yeah.
Right. So I completely just ate that up and was like, wow, this is going somewhere. Yeah. I didn't even really.
Well, that's what I love about the movie. That's why I say it's so mundane, but then it's like so dark and weird. But yeah, that's just his imagination being visualized, because then later she tells him that's not real. It's just a game that I wanted you to play to try to get over Holland, dying. Yeah. But it plays it straight, and that's what's awesome about the movie.
Sure.
And the other, the brother Holland being real is played straight. That's what's so cool. It's not it's not just fake feeling.
And you don't have to feel bad. I took it at face value too. I was like, oh, okay, so he can just do. Okay, that's interesting. But yeah,
you mentioned kind of casting earlier. Apparently, the twins that were used for this weren't really actors. They were looking in the casting call. They specifically asked for like non-actor children or whatever, which I'm sure. I mean, they may have had some acting background, but they weren't like screen acting kids or whatever, right? And I feel like they were like super authentic. I mean, there was never. I know we kind of mentioned Disney earlier, but I didn't feel that. Like, I didn't feel like it's as far as modern child actors or whatever.
Right.
They felt super natural to me.
Yeah, it didn't feel scripted, really.
Right. No. Yeah, they definitely were authentic and just perfect. You tell they had chemistry,
Right.
Because they were obviously brothers. So,
Sure.
and that showed, clearly in the book. In the very end, we're talking about the kid's mental state. He says in the book that his name is actually Holland, and he doesn't know why they keep calling him Niles.
Oh,
So
wow.
he's
So it's almost like he
consumed-
takes over by it.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, wow.
And so, within the movie, they even mention the changeling myth. In it. And so that's what's happened is that the brother dies, and that personality has now taken over Niles. Just like in the changeling myth, a fairy or elf, whatever, comes in, steals the baby, replaces it with a elf baby. And so it's like that same thing has basically happened in Niles' mind, and which is pretty cool. I don't know much about the changeling myth, but historically, that was used as a way to, like, of course, one of the things they would do, like, to see if it was a changeling was to, like, tickle or torture the baby. And a lot of times they would, like, if a baby had something wrong with it, they would say it was a changeling to kill it, so they didn't have to deal with it. And there was actually a thing called the changeling defense, which in court, which that's what you would say when, the death of whatever your child, it was a changeling, so
how far
you're
back?
Torturing it. This is really far back.
Okay, that's what I was saying. This isn't like from
This was last week.
This is just the 20s. No, I don't. Hundreds of years ago.
Sure, yeah.
Wow. So it has some historical thing, and I love the changeling myth just in general. And so it's cool how it's used in here for sure. I mean, it's even like it's more stated in the book because he becomes his older brother. Like
I thought because they kept
it.
mentioning it in the movie, I thought they were going to bring more into it with it.
Right.
It's kind of just mentioned in passing a couple times.
Yeah, exactly. But then the very end shot of Niles in the window is, I think, Holland. I have to go back and look at, but to me that felt like, oh, that's Holland now.
That's him officially taking over.
He's completely, he's killed.
He does look very sinister in that
He's very
final
sinister.
shot.
And the grandmother's died. The last thing that was like the angel watching over him, basically, and she's even dressed in that outfit that looks like the angel and all that. So I think there's a full transformation. It's just so subtle in the movie where like the book, he literally says, "Oh, why they keep calling me Niles? My name's Holland,"
What was something that really like sucked you into this? You feel like maybe the first time you watched it, or
I think it was just trying to figure out what was going on with the twins, because I could tell none of the shots, they weren't in the same shot together. It's like they kept them always separated. So in my mind, I was like, wait, something's off here.
I was even curious, is it played by the same boy, or is it two different ones? Because they're not in a shot at all together.
Right,
so.
Right. And that's too, when you're watching, you're like, man, he's really, I'm just thinking from a technical point of view, when you have someone delivering lines to someone who's not there, or like you don't even have an actor there, they're just delivering to someone else, how hard that can be. And for like a child actor or non-actor to do so well, I was like, man. But he probably really had his brother there, so the chemistry was just so good. But I mean, I love all the carnival stuff. That I grew up going to like the local fair, and I actually, my first screenplay is set in a carnival, a fair that comes to my hometown basically. And so I just, anything that has a reference to that, those pickle punks, and I just love all that stuff immediately.
for a layperson, that's like a baby in the jar type of scenario, right? For me, that's definitely what the standout scene is. Definitely the sideshow, because I think we're probably close to the same age. I mean, I saw sideshows or freak shows at state fairs and everything, and that's something that's completely fallen away in our culture. But I mean, I saw the Lobster Boy, like the infamous Lobster Boy one
cool.
time. Yeah, and of course, you know, the outside shows like a Sherabook, you know, like a really like happy-go-lucky, you know, kid, like wee, you know, like Lobster Boy. And you go inside, and it's an old man that's deformed and smoking a stogie, you know.
Yeah.
Right.
And you know, it always just really sat with me. And so anytime like a movie has like kind of a that feels real, you know, and they use actual people that were in sideshows for the scene. Like there's a sequence where a man that has pretty severe facial deformities kind of like catches one of the kids, you know, backstage, and he's a real to life. I mean, that was like truly how he looked and everything. He was an actual performer. And I feel like that's something that we kind of sidestep, like even when we make a movie about sideshow performers and everything, they kind of quietly, you know, use special effects or, you know, kind of pretty it up a little bit. So it was really cool to see that just so bold and shot almost like a TV movie too. Something about that is striking to me, you know, like seeing those people, you know, in that kind of lighting and so practical, you know.
Right, and they're just kind of like, it's mundane like the rest of the movie. That's what's so cool about it. It's just so natural feeling. And so you see, oh, those are just normal people. They're not really, you know, spectacle of freaks, which is what they're sold as, you know, that this thing to be looked at. They're just normal people that are doing a job and don't like it, but that's what they've been kind of forced into. You know? My, like this fair that would come every year, like the fair is just like a place for me for imagination, really. Like, and it's like a time where people let down their guard, and it's like, you know, it's like where all the community comes in once a year. Everybody, people that you don't see, come out for the fair, you know. Like the weird people are like, these people live here? You know, they come out, you know, everyone does. And, you know, this is not having anything to do with the movie, but there's always this, like, I guess like the freak show kind of thing. There's like a hint of like, not sex necessarily, but sensual stuff because of all the candies and all the food that you're eating and the races and the, you know, everything that's there. And so like as a kid, I was always like playing the balloon games and trying to win the mirrors with the half-naked girls sitting on hay bales or posters. And like I end up having them like all put up above my bed in the ceiling. I have no idea why my mom let that happen. But a lady who was working at my house and cleaning told my mom, said the good Lord's gonna make those posters fall down on me and smother me. But one year they had a specific trailer for oddities. And they had like, not a pickled punk, of course, but they had like, you know, two-headed squirrels and just other deformed type, you know, things. And I was just like, you know, eating it up. Just loved it, you know.
It's something that I feel like there's not an equivalent to it for young people now. There's not really something, maybe like the dark web.
There you go.
Going into seeing something really upsetting, you know, but.
Yeah.
Right.
But it's still, it's so strange how, you know, the world has become not tenuous, not you know, in the moment or real in a way. And so these experiences that we've had really with, you know, a fair and stuff, it's like you're saying, like kids are getting a version of it, but just through pictures or through video. I don't know. And that's kind of like you're saying, you know, just stuff is, you know, is lost, and it's kind of, it's strange. It's strange to think about.
What about you, Adam? What's a scene that really grabbed you from this?
The scene that I'd say probably really just, it would probably be I don't know if it came before or after the sideshow scene, but it was the first death of like the kid. He's like, I'm the king of the mountain, and falls on a pitchfork. I was like, oh shit. I was like, I did not see that coming.
Well, and it's cool the way they edited that together, because that's part of that vision scene with the crow flying around, and then it's like interspersed in there where it's a premonition of what's going to happen, really, because then once it's over, then you see the scene happen, and everyone hears and looks around when the kid screams. So that was really excellent, kind of the way they crafted that.
Well, and when when it's recontextualized, you realize, oh, the boy actually literally put the pitchfork into the hay, so that's why he knows it's going to happen.
Right,
It's
exactly.
Because he sees him before jumping down into the hay.
Right, exactly.
And then took it from there.
Yeah.
Holland kicked in, I guess.
Holland, man, he's up to no good.
Well,
I wonder with that, because it shows in a flash, like when he has a vision of when his brother was still alive. His brother was like a piece of shit. He was getting ready to like throw a cat into a well or something.
Yeah, that's what led to his death. But
Yeah.
did you see the other major plot point thing from the past with the father?
wait,
Oh yeah, yeah.
So
yeah.
so it's Holland killed the dad
Right,
too.
yeah. And so I wonder with that, like, did anybody else other than Niles know that he was such a horrible little kid? Or because you would think with him projecting all this that Holland is still alive, someone would be like, no, he's not, and he was not good.
Yeah, he sucked. So I don't know. Like in a weird way, I felt like there was sadness around the group that the good son had been corrupted by the bad one that wasn't there anymore, and that's why they were treating him so, with kid gloves or whatever.
So
Yeah.
Holland died, and everybody's like, whew, sigh of relief, and then,
but then
he
like,
starts
oh,
taking
no.
on the attributes of him, and they're like, oh,
Right. Exactly.
not again.
I thought it was Niles.
Niles, yeah.
Niles is the
He's a
officially
good kid.
Yeah, Niles is a good kid. Holland is the bad one.
kid.
Oh, I totally had it backwards. This whole time I was like, they're messing it up. Like, I was fighting to jump in. Okay. Yeah. Why is this so hard to find? What's going on?
That's a good question. I don't know.
I'd say it has to be
mean-
like some sort of rights issues or something.
Well,
I
I mean,
can imagine.
anything that gets released you have to obtain the rights that
Right.
goes out. I don't think there's any issues around it. It's just demand and the fact that if you rely on digital places for the movies, it's like that's such a gamble.
Yeah.
Because I mean, every movie is put up on something for a certain amount of time.
Yeah.
Like all my movie stuff, it's bought for a certain amount of years, and then the rights go back to the owner. Mm-hmm. So it's like, that's just probably what happened. If it ever was on a streaming service, I'm not even sure if it has ever been.
Yeah, I don't know that it has. I just think with companies like Vinegar Syndrome and Severin and Arrow, you think somebody would have put this out by now.
You would for sure. I mean, it could be costs. I can't imagine it would cost that much.
Yeah,
but
I
it's
wouldn't
just like
think
there's
so.
so many movies and those services, they're trying to get eyeballs.
Mm-hmm.
They're trying to get people to subscribe and stay. So it's like, what do they want to get when they spend their time on an old movie that not that many people know about, or like the newest something, and spend their dollars there, to get it. So it's like I can understand why it should be somewhere because it's awesome.
Especially with Vinegar, because they put out some obscure stuff.
Well, I'm just surprised because when I was doing just a little bit of reading about this stuff, Tom Tryon, apparently like a lot of people, because he kind of came into his own in the 70s as a writer, like people kind of throw him in that era anyway, with like Blatty and Ira Levin, that wrote like really big horror books in the 70s. So I'm just surprised that there's no one that kind of goes, oh, this guy was huge, like right before Stephen King and all this stuff kicked off. It seems like someone would want to kind of like mine that well, and I'm just surprised that no one's gone back to it at some point with so many things getting rebooted and remade and reevaluated. This seems like something that's like ripe for that sort of treatment,
Possibly, yeah.
Although there was, it's not a remake, but and maybe they just.
Hello, Craig here again. I just wanted to give another spoiler warning for a little film called Goodnight Mommy. That's right, another spoiler warning for Goodnight Mommy.
Kind of had a similar idea, but it reminds me of that movie Goodnight Mommy.
Well, that's what I was going to bring
Yeah.
up. Like, that's when I watched Goodnight Mommy. Within like the first scene, I was like, the kid's dead.
Yeah,
The
yeah,
brother's
for
dead.
sure.
It's
Yeah.
like- and it was because I'd seen this movie, and as I watched Goodnight Mommy, I was like, "There's no way he's seen this movie." Like
They
read the-
have to.
He had to. Like it's just too similar in a way.
Yeah. That was same thing when I watched this movie the other night. That was my first thought. I was like, oh, I see where Goodnight. I forget the filmmakers' names,
Yeah.
but I was like, yeah, they definitely got it from this movie. They have to.
Had to.
Well, it's what I always go into the weeds of IMDb and look at people's comments and everything, little reviews, and I saw so many that were like, I saw this on TV, like just movie of the week style on CBS, and it's pretty wild because it is rated PG, so
Yeah.
I guess by all standards and practices, it could air on television without a problem. So I just picture all these kids watching it,
Yeah.
and being lulled into a false sense of security, and then just being like, oh my god, because
It is so dark. Yeah.
it's funny you talked about, how'd you pickled punks? Is that what you call it?
Yeah, pickled punks, yeah.
Obviously the big kicker in this movie, the climactic death is a newborn baby in a barrel of is it like beer, right?
Wine or beer or something,
it's
or apple cider or
apple
something.
cider,
Yeah, and it's that weird. Theme of the changeling and babies in the in the jars, whatever. It just kicks out on that, and it's such a brutal. You just see the crown of the baby, when they open up.
Such a subtle but devastating moment to do that.
And watching the different reactions of people, of course, crying, but some of the men can't look at it, and some are just staring. It's like, it's so powerful. I was like, man.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I was, even at that point when I knew all the sinister stuff was happening and this kid probably was dead, I wasn't expecting it to, and you're right, it's so visceral, even though they don't go to the point of,
like, look at this dead
right,
baby.
it's not super ghoulish or anything, it's very straightforward and probably could have been done back in the day, without a problem too, in the 50s or whatever, but yeah, I still kind of, it's still kind of in the ether, just seeing that image or whatever, right? But yeah, anyone listening, this is almost impossible to find.
It's a tough one to track down.
Yeah, I bought the DVD, I don't remember, years ago. So I've just always had it.
Disney owns this now because they bought 20th Century Fox, so you would think
needs to go upon Disney
they
Plus.
would,
I guess
they'd throw it up on Hulu or something. but I guess
sure.
again, maybe that's more expensive than what it's worth.
If Disney does own it, maybe that's why it's not been.
That's why
just
Vinegar hasn't
costs too
released
much,
it.
Yeah. Who knows? But it needs to be out there for sure. It's cool.
But if you're listening to this and you can track it down, I think it's safe to say we all recommend it
For sure.
and definitely should check it out. I normally try to buy a copy if I can, and even I was looking on eBay and stuff, and you have the price gouging.
Yeah, like $7. I think there was like a DVD was like $70, $80.
Right.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Starting
Wow.
point. Yeah, and you don't even know what you're
crazy.
getting really.
Yeah, it
so
could be
You
scratched
just get a
up or-
DVD-R of it or something.
All right.
Yeah.
So, but if you can find it, there was also a video essay that I came across by an Adam Zanzi that is extremely well made.
Really?
He did a great
That's
job
cool.
with it, and he had actually written a blog post when one of the brothers passed away several years ago. That got the attention of Roger Ebert, and Ebert retweeted it and wrote a little bit because Ebert apparently was a big fan of this movie and was a big defender of it because a lot of people thought it was when it was released a little too, I don't want to say sappy, but maybe a little too sentimental, about nostalgia and all this stuff. And I think they just missed the boat. I don't know, maybe it's an age thing. People that were old enough to remember that era maybe thought it was a little too nostalgia goggle or something, but
A little too hokey or something.
maybe. I don't know.
I thought it was great. The one old lady character was definitely over the top.
Yeah, she gets intense in some scenes.
Yeah, but I know people that were like that, so are like that. So.
We didn't even mention that John Ritter is
Oh,
in this.
yeah.
Yeah. Very
John.
natural and just it's just crazy just seeing him just in this really small role before he kind of blew up, I guess.
Yeah, because he's just like a little side character.
Sure.
You just get little glimpses of him here and there, just kind of talking, But it was cool seeing a young John Ritter just in a movie, just playing this character before he's Three's Company and all this other stuff. So
He's one of the big tragedies, I feel like, when he died so young, because he was like going into that era of being maybe a character actor. You see him in like Bad Santa, Sling Blade. You think, by now he would be probably that go-to guy that would be playing all these, interesting roles and stuff. And Victor French too, right? Is in this, from Little House on the Prairie, this is showing my age a little bit, but Highway to Heaven. It was kind of interesting because he usually plays like a gruff, kind of heavy character. So it was neat. He's like the put upon scapegoat for everything bad that's happening. He's the hired hand that's very sympathetic, and he's like an Italian immigrant, and other that they kind of, throw all this stuff on. And he becomes like a hopeless drunk by the end of the movie, because I guess he feels like maybe he is responsible for some of the things that are happening. And
that's the way it plays out in the movie. In the book, he's the one in the end who convinces the grandpa that it was Niles all along, because he knows from the beginning he did not misplace that pitchfork.
Yeah.
Or so, and that's what leads them to send Niles to the funny farm.
Tell us about you mentioned some other points about the differences in the book, and
honestly, those are the main ones. I was trying to remember what my experience was when I read the book, but it was basically, because it was written by the same guy, so like it stayed fairly close to it. I kind of thought, of course, it's more description or whatever, and I think it felt like the game stuff was longer or more drawn out or something in the book, but that's all I could really remember from the structure of the book, outside of the bookends of the false narrator, Niles talking, about it. And then you figure out in the end that he's not just Niles, he thinks he's Holland, the bad brother.
Do you think that it was, you kind of made it sound like it was almost like a wraparound?
Yeah.
Do you think it was wise to cut that?
Oh, yeah, 100%. Because it just breaks, because in the beginning, he's in a funny farm. He's like, in the book, he's staring up at the ceiling at this like spot in the, that's moldy or whatever, and he's seeing stuff in it, and it's just like, obviously he's cuckoo. and it felt almost like kind of like the way Psycho, the last part of Psycho, when he's so it was very wise to not have that at all in the story. You could have had it in the very end, but I think, like I said, there's the subtle thing of seeing Niles in the window. Yeah. And they may have shot those scenes of him being sent away, and they may have, even done that and just thought, you don't really need that for this story. You don't need a voiceover. You don't need this, it breaks the illusion of, the brothers in a way. Actually, it could have been fine because he's someone telling a story about the brothers, but...
Yeah. The way they punch out is really strong in the movie.
Yeah.
It leaves it kind of almost a little ambiguous, but still kind of gives you that hint. Like we were saying earlier, he looks pretty menacing staring out that window, and then he just gets called down for dinner, and it's just credits.
Right.
So.
Also, there's this thing that happens that I learned in one of my screenplays is, it's not in here, but this is something similar. You can't write a flashback in a flashback. Okay. Yeah. Which seems like it would be totally fine, but it's just too confusing to have someone telling a story about something or then have inside that a flashback. So within the story of context of this movie, if you had someone telling a story of the past, and in that past is a person who thinks that another person exists in it, that's too confusing. And that's maybe, if it's fine in the novel, but maybe in the film it would just be too confusing for the audience.
The video essay that I watched mentioned that there is potentially an alternate version of this where the ending punches out differently, studio mandate style, where it gives you a little bit more of a happy punch out, where basically there's like there's basically like a voiceover that implies, and I never played the game again, like that type of thing, where it sort of leaves you when you exit the theater, you go, well, at least things are normal now,
Yeah.
Like,
I think I read something about that where they had like some narration of him talking to Holland saying we can't play the game anymore and something like that. So
oh wow, I'm glad that's gone.
Yeah, I love the open ending where it implies
he's dark.
It's just gonna go this way a lot longer.
It's not good. Yeah.
What would you grade the other?
Are we doing in
Chad.
stars or are we doing
This is-
A,
we
B,
do,
C?
like A, B, C,
Yes.
D, E, F.
With all the pluses and minuses, you know,
Solid A.
solid A.
Oh, me now?
Yes, Adam.
Yeah, I'll give it a solid A as well.
I will too. Straight A's across the board from the Holler Kings.
I didn't see that coming at all.
If you can track it down, we say check it out.
This is Dr. Gangrene, Nashville horror host, and you're listening to the Holler Kings.
We returned. Gonna bug you a little bit about filmmaking, Southern style.
Let's do it.
I was curious about with your movies in particular, they feel naturally Southern as opposed to like someone kind of from out of the area making a movie that's Southern. And I was just curious about like with the stories that you've told, was it a process of sort of like, this is my experience and I want to tell this kind of story and kind of bring that Southern feel into it? Or is it more of like a Robert Rodriguez, write what you have access to type thing, if that makes any sense?
Yeah, totally. I mean, they're all from me, like, you know, and from my experiences growing up in the South. You know, I think it's Flannery O'Connor, maybe it said something like, anybody can be a writer who's gone through childhood.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of, you know, very true. And so the stories I'm writing about at least pieces of my past to a certain degree. And, you know, particularly the two movies that I've made so far, they're also ideas that I've been thinking about. I'm not talking about a story idea. I'm talking about like a question about like life. And so like with Jugface, my wife and I had just had my daughter. And, you know, I was like, you know, an art kid, went to art school, and then I was a DJ. You know, I was into nightlife stuff, you know, having partying and, you know, all that. And then once you have a kid, you kind of realize, oh my God, like I can't just go out and party like I want to anymore. Like my life means more. And it did before that too, but, you know, you're a kid and you're just living it up and you're not really thinking about how your life impacts others, you know, which of course my parents and all that. But once you have a kid, you realize, oh, wow, what I'm doing right now literally relates to this person that I have to take care of. And so that's what started the question of a character who's, you know, has to sacrifice herself to her community, you know, for the benefit of the community. Because that's what I was feeling like I was having to do to a part of me, was sacrifice that to take care of my daughter and not, you know, damage myself anymore.
Right.
You know, so, and then like with Dementer, this was a funny one because what ended up being what I think is the meaning behind it. But at the time, like my sister, of course, my sister's in it and she has Downs and she's in the facility that you see in the movie. And they came up with the group that manages that and other ones in Tennessee. They came up with an idea that they don't want the clients always being at the center all day long. Like, you know, they wanted to be part of the community, and that's great. Like, yeah, you don't want them shut up. You know, they're not supposed to be hidden. The decision was, okay, they have to be outside the center 6 hours a day. Okay, so that's like they go into the center at 8 or 9, you know, 8. They leave at 9. They don't come back till 3, and then they leave at 4 to go back to the home. Well, that's way too much time. There's only so many places they can go. For one, and a lot of these, you know, clients have different mobility issues, all kinds of problems that forcing them to be run around all the time is tiring. And so, like my sister, on Saturdays they don't even change their clothes; they let them stay in their pajamas because they just are so tired from the week. So that's like an example of wanting to do something positive, but almost doing something negative.
Right.
in your desire. So that was like really in my brain about people wanting to do the right thing, but using the wrong means or not understanding what their actions, as good as intentions they were, will have in the world. And so anyway, so I start writing Dementer about this girl who's being controlled or has memories of a cult experience that are somehow affecting her life now. She's trying to take care of my sister in the movie. And I had gone, this is when I was like doing yoga. And that's funny, you go to yoga class and you're supposed to like not talk to, or you're not supposed to even be thinking about the rest of the world. Like you're supposed to be blissed out and, you know, your mind's supposed to be wiped and all that. But the funny thing is I'm like very competitive. So even in yoga, I'll be competing with the people around me. And my wife's like, that's not how it's supposed to work. And I'm like, I know, but I can't take it. I can't help it. But anyway, we had gone through the class and we're in like the chill out part at the very end where you're supposed to be quiet. And I just started, because I'd written the script, and I got to the ending. It's a very dark ending, and I wrote another version of it because I was so uncomfortable. That's kind of what happens, too, when you're writing. Mm-hmm. You'll write the right thing, but then fear will creep in your mind, and you'll wonder, wait, is this right? And it's really about not even is this right, what will other people think about it? How will they react? And so then you start thinking, oh, maybe it isn't right, and you write something different. So I'd written the whole thing with 2 endings. Then I reread it, because as I'm writing the scenes, I won't go back, really. I just want to keep going with it. So I don't really have a good sense of the entire flow of the story yet until I go back and read it. And once I read it from the beginning to the end, it was very clear the ending that's in the movie is what's supposed to be there. So, but I was like, what the hell does this mean? Because I knew with Jugface what I was thinking about with my daughter. It was very clear in my brain. And this was like, what is going on with me? And so anyway, at the end of the yoga, I realized that this is kind of like my comment on social media. And it's like, because it's about a character who means to do well. She's acting out these simple ideas that she's gotten from a notebook, these one-liners, which is like Twitter to me, and thinking they have power and thinking they're going to do, positive things, but in the end doesn't know that she's being controlled by something bad, and harming people. And to me, you can look at that politically on both sides and see how these little one-liners are used and just concept that people don't really understand the full effects of where these ideas will lead, and they spout them out as like truths that would help people or whatever.
It's all a sound bite.
Yeah, it was so funny. That's what yoga class. I was like, oh, that's what that's about.
And what was your last job?
Well, I've kind of just done odds and ends to get by. I just really would like a job doing something where I feel like I was doing something good.
Jugface focuses sort of on like a cult type scenario, and Dementer too. Is that kind of Southern influence at all, or is just like, backwoods cult, just kind of cool?
No, for sure, because like in my town, like my best friend, his mother was in like, one of those very obscure sects of Christianity where they don't cut their hair. She had to speak in tongues when she turned 14, or they wouldn't let her leave the church, type of a thing.
Oh, wow.
So I was always around very kind of,
intense
Christianity, like weird versions of it. Mm-hmm. So the idea of cults, and it just seems like pretty natural to me that people will have a spin-off of ideas, and be doing their own thing, over here.
This is something I ask guests sometimes, and I think it always throws them for a loop, so feel free to sidestep it. But do you feel like being raised in the South and just being a Southerner, that horror hits different for a Southerner than, say, another standard issue American?
I mean, for sure. Well, for me, it's even more relatable in a way, like the concept of the other, and just, really like having, like, this is not supposed to be a sob story at all, but my sister has Down syndrome, and so that's like, as a kid, I'm in a different scenario, even though it felt totally normal. Like my life with her is normal. It wasn't anything weird about it until we would go out somewhere. Right. Then you realize it's different. And but just as a kid having to process something like that, I think there's like a study that shows that, like, kids that have something traumatic happen to them when they're young, they sort of develop creative abilities from that because they're forced to see themselves. I don't know, the psychology behind it, but there's definitely like a study that
coping mechanism.
Yeah,
kind of.
Yeah, you hear a lot of times about like horror writers that had childhood injuries where they're in the hospital for a long time. And so I guess you're pushed into using your imagination in some way. And as a kid, like I was in the woods all the time. Like I hated school.
It's escapism.
Yeah. And I was coming up with stories, and I just was, really good at it, just walking around and thinking of, strange things. And whether that relates to my life with my sister or whatever, I don't know exactly. But supposedly some part of that, trying to deal with all that, did help my mind in a strange way. But just, the South and things there are grotesque. There's just something about Southern culture that it's very vibrant and very, well, of course we have the Civil War effects of it that are still kind of present in a way. And so it's a beautifully wounded place in my mind. Like there's a professor I had in New York who had come down actually to my other school and he was like, man, the South is like a weird place, as in a kind of like a bad way. And I was like, it's tragically flawed, and that's what's kind of beautiful about it to me. And so I don't know if that relates to the concept of like a monster. Like it's flawed, but there's something cool about that. And so all those kind of threads I think that's maybe a sort of an answer for what you're talking about.
Great. Yeah.
No, and just you guys touching on religion, I couldn't help but, just kind of think of that being sort of a unique angle. I mean, I know everywhere has, religion and different, cultures kind of intermingling and everything, but it's weird how
it hits different in the South.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like in Tennessee, there's so many different types of Christianity,
just like you were talking about. Yeah.
Right. And you grow up with people debating, who's going to hell and, what's right and what's wrong and everything. And I feel like that there's something that resonates in horror with that stuff sometimes.
And you got people, you could talk to somebody and they'll be like, oh, I don't watch horror movies. That's going to invite demons in.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, so never mind. Yeah. No, yeah, I won't talk about how I love horror movies then.
Yeah,
so.
Or any mention of anything magic in movies. They can't take that, because they think it's...
Harry Potter's a sin.
Yeah, right. Black magic and whatever. What's interesting is like, the German settlers in Appalachia, the early settlers, they actually believed in magic along with their Christianity. So, a bunch of occult stuff, reading signs and, doing magic and believing very literally that others, witches existed, neighbors sometimes. And so anything that was wrong with you, wrong with your farm, it was probably because of a witch. But when they did their magic to fight the witch, they believed that was God's will. So to me, it's funny that you can be a Christian and believe so fully, but then not like movies with magic in it. When you'd have to believe it's real if you are, a devout Christian, because Jesus does magic. He creates water from wine, or wine from water, and then creates bread and fish. He's like doing magic in the Bible.
Yeah.
It's funny, being on the outside of it looking in, it's probably a little unfair, but you'll just see marquees of churches, and it'll say something like, I remember one, it's already a little ways back, but it was like the Da Vinci Code, fact and fiction. You know what I mean? Like as though they were going to parse out what, and it's like, it's all fiction. It's a fiction book. Like, why are you worried about this? Like, why would it even, be something you feel the need to explain away or whatever? But I mean, apparently people are really threatened by anything that.
Well, they also got the butts in the seats too. They need to fill their coffers and all that stuff. So.
Yeah, that's true.
There's a lot of strange motivations behind the running of a church, which is good, I guess, to a certain degree, but it's oddly complicated by like a business, right? And money, so it's kind of strange.
So something I really loved about Dementer is it felt super authentic to the South. and you sidestep any kind of
cliches.
I mean, like, there's never someone in overalls or like all the things that I feel like an outside of the South person making a movie about the South would kind of thrust into it. You naturally sidestepped. Like, I don't even think it was a deliberate choice necessarily, but it was just something about it really.
It was more like, because I was shooting it documentary style. I just wanted to look like it looks right now, even though I know people that wear overalls. I see them like all the time, you know. And I mean, even with like Jugface, people are like, oh, you know, those characters are so stereotypical. I'm like, yeah, but there are people here just like that. For sure, yeah. And that's why they're in there. But the way you sidestep that is you make them real characters that are, you know, full of strange ideas, good and bad, you know, and present them naturally as just normal people.
It's funny because every time we kind of dive into something and parse out, you know, what's authentic and whatever, and I almost always have that defensive. They got a guy in overalls and he's talking with an accent or whatever, and then Adam's almost always like,
"That's my uncle."
I literally know that guy. So, and I always have to concede that, like, even though I have that chip on my shoulder a little bit, a lot of those things there is some truth to it.
There is, but you can tell when it's totally fake.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Like when it's just a carbon copy of a stereotype. That's different. Like it's not really based on something real, you know.
Right. When they roll up with like a corncob pipe and everything, you're like, okay, come on, calm down now. But it is true. That's one thing I really liked about Dementer as well, was how you watch that movie and you can tell, okay, this was shot pretty much with all people that are naturally from Tennessee.
Yeah.
And that really shows in not having these caricatures and everything, because it's people. I mean, there are, you know, like some country accents in there, but it's not, you know, Sandra Bullock in The Blind Side or something. Right. You know,
I think Hillbilly Elegy is like the worst.
Oh, okay.
That recently, when that trailer dropped, I was like, "Is this a Saturday Night Live sketch?" Like, I was really genuinely confused by it. But yeah, I mean, it's just so natural, and I think. There was an interview with you I listened to where you said in the beginning you almost thought about literally following your sister around for a while and doing it literally documentary style, and then kind of coming up with later. But
because I was like, well, I mean, I paid for the movie, so it was like, man, I need to do this cheap.
Yeah,
what's the cheapest thing I could do? And that would be me, a camera, and I was like, I need an audio guy there though, but. I don't know, maybe I would do the audio as well and just follow her around and see what, film her and just see what I would have then to then build upon and recreate a story, which is, I still think it's a really cool idea, but hard, hard. And then I was like, okay, actually I only have this amount of money, not much. So that means we're going to do a tiny shoot with a tiny crew and get it all in 14 days.
Right.
And so it's okay.
Is that what was your kind of main shooting, was 14 days?
Yeah, it's 14 days.
Wow.
But the crazy thing is, I mean, that's tiny, but Jugface was 17 days.
Oh, really? And you got a lot more going on there.
Yeah, but the thing is, we have a bigger crew. Oh, so like you have a big enough crew that can handle and squeeze it into a 17 shoot day. And then my latest film was 15 right now, and which was too short for that script really. But and we have a small crew, so it didn't like even out the way it did in Jugface, where we had the right amount of crew, short days, but we could move fast. But what's weird is on Dementer, I mean, we moved really fast too because we had a tiny crew, but we had a tiny setup, so we could just continually shoot. Which I needed that because it was like I would start running the camera on my sister or any of the clients or anyone with disabilities, or even the all the non-actors, which is everyone, and we would have to like do multiple takes, or it would take 5 to 10 minutes for my sister to stop laughing, or giggling and making like fart noises to like just chill out, and I can get that look that I needed for this moment, which was like something's wrong, but really she's just sick of me holding a camera in her face. She would like make fun of me, like imitate me, bossing people around on set with her. So
that was one thing when we watched it that I was really curious about, was how you directed her. Like how much of it was like literal, like, hey, in this moment, you're upset, or how much of it was just you captured that moment and you thought, okay, I can, throw this here,
Right. Yeah. I mean, some things. No, there's. You can't tell my sister to do an emotion and have her do it.
Can't do any line reading.
She can't read a line. I got her to say Katie.
Okay.
I had to sit when my sister's gone and Katie's in the woods and you're just hearing voices. Like she's saying Katie, I just had to do that in a mic and say Katie, and she would try to say it, and it was just over and over. But no, just growing up with my sister, I know her reactions to things. Mm-hmm. And I knew that she would cry at one point because she normally does that at every event that we've ever had. She'll cry to get attention, and we'll look at her and be like, Stephanie, and then she'll start laughing. And even there's a scene in the movie where they're at the dance. She's crying in that scene, but then I had to cut. There's a frame I had to cut immediately because she started laughing, and then she would go back to the pretend crying again. It's just what her behavior is. So all those scenes, I just knew that if I waited long enough, or I just know her behavior. So it's almost none of it. I said, Stephanie, do this. None of it. Oh, outside of singing this. Like that recorder, because I knew as a kid we grew up and she always had those every Christmas, and we would even sing we had a tape from Chuck E. Cheese maybe, the Bears or whatever. Showbiz. Yeah, so we had a tape of that, and I remember we would lay on my bed and sing into one of those recorders, and so I just knew that she would imitate some song or whatever and know that, and it's all just built around what I know she'll do, which is really a weird way to kind of try to craft a story,
Well, I mean, I don't want to lay it on too thick because you're literally sitting here, but you have a real gift, because I feel like in someone else's hands, this type of material could be exploitive, or it could stumble, and it could be kind of oh, what are you doing, But I mean, there's just not a hint of that, because I mean, honestly, when I kind of read the gist of it, I was like, oh gosh, what am I getting into? You know what I mean? I don't know how I'm going to feel about this.
Sure.
And then I loved it. I mean, I thought it was so well done, and the documentary style, I think, is really what resonated with me, and into the weed stuff I'll probably cut, but Am and I met as corrections officers right back several years ago.
Oh wow. Okay.
So some of the feel of it reminded me of that experience on some level, where it's a tucked away thing that no one ever thinks about. Mm-hmm. And there's kind of a system, and a routine, and my unit sometimes was a special needs unit, so it had all kinds of interesting people and that you had to kind of deal with. And I just saw so much of that captured in this movie that I mean, no one else touches. I mean, it's just an aspect of life that no one, has the balls to kind of get into. So,
and it's made the movie, the reception of it, fairly strange. I think that's why it's particularly now, I mean, with cancel culture and people so worried about being blown up about something on, the internet that's in their movie or that's at a festival. Hardly none of the festivals wanted it. But if we'd gone 10 years before, it's that's the movie that people go to festivals to see.
Right.
But now they're so worried about just people immediately tweeting out or going to Facebook and griping about something that, they'll lose money, because it's always very hard to run a film festival. But it's I made the worst movie possible. But you would think it would be the right movie, with representation being a huge thing. Mm-hmm. But it's people are funny. They want to say that, but they don't really mean the uncomfortable stuff.
They feel like everything's a landmine to them.
Yeah, exactly. So
you do it in such a matter-of-fact way, too, because there's angles where you do that. Someone could do that to modeling, or, in an area where it does feel exploitive, but you thread that. Yeah,
well,
you know what I mean? It's just...
it's because I've grown up in it.
Yeah, it's matter of fact.
Yeah, it's matter of fact, exactly. I've been there, and that I mean, she's been going to that center for 27 years, maybe. So I've been there through countless people that have worked there, countless events, and, so it's just I was just being normal, I just... Sure. There you go. But yeah, someone could totally have screwed it up.
No,
real
I
easy.
mean,
No one would have known how to manipulate. Because that's always what you're trying to get an actor to be in the moment,
Right.
And sometimes you're trying to manipulate the actor. They can't get there to be in the right moment, for the point of in the story. So it's like with my sister, it's like that's why having that previous knowledge of all of her reactions, I could craft it. Otherwise, if someone came to that, like how would they get my sister to do any of that?
Yeah.
Because I couldn't either, so they definitely couldn't.
No, in fairness, I guess that is why a lot of people don't try it, right? One thing you mentioned in a recent interview that I listened to is writing novels. Are you still? Is that something you're still kind of pursuing, or was that like a lockdown thing?
That was a lockdown thing. Yeah. I outline, and then once I started writing it, I wrote like the first chapter and really enjoyed it, and then I realized that I'd screwed up the outline really bad. I'd spent all this month, and I was just like, "Oh, forget it. Like, I'll just go back to my screenplays and try to do this." But maybe eventually, I'll go back to that type of writing. It's definitely the funny thing is like, I've won writing awards and I've written this stuff, and like if someone says, like a movie by me, they'll have an idea of it. Like, that's from the writing. But I'm like not really a writer. That's like, at least I wasn't as a kid. Mm-hmm. Like I hated school. I hated English class. I love literature, but I couldn't spell to save my life. So even my handwriting from an early age, I developed like the craziest looking handwriting possible to cover up the fact that I couldn't spell anything. But I would do fine with grammar and all that. But it's like I couldn't pass a test because of so many spelling errors. So then I developed like a writing of just using my safe words, And even though I was in like, advanced English classes in high school and stuff, but I just never thought, like, I'm not a writer, I'm an artist. Like, I was just an art kid in high school, drawing and sculpting. And I was just making movies with my parents' VHS camcorder. Didn't know I could ever even learn how to make movies until I went to art school and they had that as a degree. And I was like, oh, shit.
Sure.
I'm going to go make movies. Yeah, horror movies. This is great. And it was in there where I took my first screenwriting class. And it was just like a one-page scene. And when I wrote it, I was like, what? I was like, so writing a screenplay is just watching the movie in your mind. Creating it in your mind. And it was like, yeah. I was like, oh, like, okay. Damn, I can do that. And in that first thing, I was like, it had a quality, like I feel like all my writing does. Like, it's a thing that comes from me that's, you can recognize in a way. And I was like, oh shit, I can actually write. So then I became pretty focused on trying to learn how to write better. Once people, particularly in New York, teachers telling me like, how much Southern Gothic literature do you read? I'm like, none. And they're like you write just like that. You should read it. I was like, oh shit, okay. And anyway, so then once you finish film school, particularly in the 90s, it was like, well, how do you go out into the world and do something with this? It's like, okay, you have to direct something that you've written. And so I was okay, well, I need to get really good at writing, feature-length screenplays. So then we had a choice of basically move to LA or move to Nashville, which sounds like not a real choice, but it was like September 11th had happened. We were living there, my wife and I, or soon-to-be wife. And so we were just kind of like, well, maybe we'll just move to Nashville for a little bit and see how that goes. And so I wrote for like 7 years. And she worked a normal job, and I just wrote.
Oh, wow.
And it took, many, like I said, these screenplays that die in the middle to kind of understand what's going on. And I ended up writing a short. Actually, it was the screenplay that I'm talking about that with the flashback in the flashback.
Oh, really?
That I cut out. And it wasn't even a featured screenplay anymore. It was like 45 pages. But it was a contained story that was really good. And I won a writing competition at a festival with that. It was like in Pennsylvania. And the guy was from Penn State, the judge. And he was just like real encouraging, like, dude, you got to do something like this. And I realized then what it takes to write a complete story, because that's like a weird thing that has to click in your brain, like, oh, this is a complete story now. You know, it's finished and it means something. And so then I realized what I needed to do to win a competition. And so then, I don't know if it's immediately after that, but soon after that, I started writing on Jugface. Mm-hmm. And that script won Slam Dance's writing competition. And that's what propelled me, you know, because then that was in Variety. And so anyone would take my phone call, and like, you know, I was in LA for the award ceremony or whatever. And that's kind of how everything got started. Mm-hmm. So it's odd that it went through writing to get me where I'm right now, which is still like, you know, I'm, you know, in the gutters, I say, as far as like the horror thing, because, you know, I'm not in LA, though I was in LA for a year. But it's, the writing that's got me there. And I had just an idea of making a horror movie with my sister a few years before I made it, and I just thought it's got legs to it. I don't know what I would do, but there's something there. And I had been up for a couple of different bigger movies, not bigger, but slightly bigger, but like remake movies like Dawn of the Dead and a Texas Chainsaw Massacre that I don't know if it was ever made. I think it was, but not the one that just came out. It was like another one, but I couldn't get those jobs necessarily. And one reason I felt like it was because I was not present in LA. Right. I'd go out there, take meetings, mini meetings, you know, multiple weeks, but then it would just like kind of die. Yeah. And I was like, we need to move out there. And my wife wasn't happy with her job at that time, so we just decided to sell the house, and this was in 2015. So, you know, we had bought a new house in 2009 in Nashville, so, you know, it's gone way up. So we used that money to live on and move to LA, and it went horribly wrong. It was fine for me. You know, I kind of hated it, but I knew people there, and I started to progress as far as meetings. People saying, oh, man, like this guy's good at writing and he's cool. Okay, you know, and my wife really hated it, and like within like 3 weeks she was extremely homesick and just wanted to get out of there. So it was not a good environment. And my daughter was fine; she was young enough to just flow with it. So then once we got back to Tennessee, because I had to tell everyone it had only been like maybe 7 or 8 months. Like, okay, now I have to move back to Tennessee, and I had gotten in the circle with everyone. It was like I was going to specific horror parties, specific horror filmmaker get-togethers. I was one of them. And I could tell that doors were like, you know, being open for me. And once I said I have to move, they looked at me like with this look of just like blank. And in their minds, they're thinking, there's no way you can do what you want to do and not be here. So like to them, I should just said, yeah, I have cancer. I'm going to die in 2 months. Right, you know, I mean, it was literally the same thing. And so once I got back to Tennessee, you know, my wife hadn't worked in a year. I didn't have a job, and we had used the money to live on in LA from the house. And now the rest of the money was now in a new house in Nashville. Right. Because we wanted to get back in the same neighborhood so my daughter could go back to the same school again with her friends, all that stuff. So I was so stressed at that time that I was having these moments where the sky would turn to liquid. Like I was that stressed out. Mm-hmm. It would last for like 30 seconds. I mean, that's extreme stress. Your brain is like, you know. And I thought and then so I went to work for my dad's company out of town half the week. And that was his own problems because he had extreme mental issues at the time. And that was just really hard. And so anyway, after a couple months of that, every year I would go to Sundance and hang out with people there because Slam Dance happens the same time. Right. That's the competition I won. So they had like an awards thing, and I'd met someone at parties then and became good friends. And so I was going every year anyway just to go to the film festival. And when I went there that year, I was like, I just have to have a movie. Like I have to have something else going to get my name back out there. What can I do by myself? And that's how I kind of came back and was like, this horror movie with my sister, I don't know what it's going to be, but I want to do it. And then I wrote the script with Katie, who's the lead actress, for her, because I was like, well, who can I get? And she's been in my other films, and so I know she could do it, and she was the right personality. She's like so sweet that I knew she would be perfect. And to bring people into this environment is not. I had to make sure I knew them and believed in these people as people. Because this is not a situation I want to bring anyone weird into at all.
Right.
And so I wrote it for Katie, and I said, before I even wrote it, I just kind of told her what it was about. Do you want to do it? And she's like, well, yeah. And then I wrote it and gave it to her.
And you were talking about your writing process a little bit. Do you kind of follow the same format for each movie, or is it different? Like, I know you said you kind of start with the outline and go from there. Do you ever do kind of the whole vomit draft thing, or you kind of try to get it all beat by beat before you lay it out and start writing?
I take about a month to outline always. I mean, I've done it every kind of way I could try. It just seems like the best way is to come up with an idea, a concept, then break it down into like not a log line, but which is just one sentence, but like a 3-sentence version of what the movie should be. And sometimes it's hard to kind of get all that together, but if I can, then I know beginning, middle, end of the story, because it's in those 3 sentences. And once you can do that, then I start doing brainstorming scenes. I'll think of a scene, and it could be in the middle of the movie, and then I'll write it down. And I use a program called Scrivener, and it has a really good note card little system where it's like how classic Hollywood screenplays were written. They would write them on note cards and put them up on a board. Right. And those would represent a scene, and they could move them all around. And then editors still do that now. They'll break a whole movie down just in note cards so they can see it, all up and move stuff around. So I work with that, and I just go through. I write just like 1 or 2 sentences per scene. I don't really get all crazy about it. And then I just dream it, you just read the sentence and I dream the scene. And then you just go through it enough to that, okay, I have the whole movie now. It may not flow like this, but I have a basic outline, of most of the scenes. And I'll know, okay, every card, it represents about probably 2 pages of a script, so I need, 50 cards. And then I have a 100-page script, which is, a little over an hour and a half movie. Yeah. Yeah, and so then I'll just start. Then I'll write the first draft. I won't do much editing to it at all. I'll just write from the beginning and go. Which is basically the vomit draft. Yeah, I would never show that to anyone ever. Yeah, it's because it's just totally messed up. And then I'll make a correction of that one, and that will be the real first draft that I may show someone.
What can you tell us about the Alaskan project? It's okay if
what
it's
can
nothing.
I tell you about it? Yeah,
it takes place in shot in Alaska.
There you go.
What was the sort of difference experience wise of like shooting in Tennessee as opposed to shooting in Alaska?
Well, I mean, one of the major differences was the weather, obviously.
I was going to say, do you face a lot of hardships with that?
Yeah. When I wrote the script, I was looking at images from the summertime.
Oh, yeah.
And when we got there to shoot, there was at least 8 foot of snow on the sides of the roads.
Didn't you? It was in May, though, right? Wasn't it around
April?
April,
May. Yeah. It started melting. Basically, there's one road that goes to where we were shooting, and you couldn't see a stop sign. It was a speed sign, but by the end of it, it had melted down. You could see, you could see the whole thing. So it melted a couple feet because I was there for 28 days. Yeah, I mean, cold. I love the cold, and I really wasn't that cold until just all of a sudden, just where this town is called Whittier, Alaska, the wind would come and it'd be like 80 miles an hour. Like we were shooting the last scene of a night. It was about 3 o'clock in the morning, and the wind was coming. We couldn't hold the camera steady, and the lights that were shining down this car to light it had gels on it, and the gels were flapping so loudly that we couldn't record clean audio in the vehicle.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so, I mean, that was wild. We're like, oh, whoa, like, we have to just stop, Then we had another night where...
Why don't I have a sound stage?
Yeah, we thought, like, the wind was going so hard that the camera was being hit by rocks.
Crazy.
Then we had, of course, like snow, rain, sideways rain. And then, like, yeah, I guess just the light issue there was really strange, where it would start going down till 10, but then it would start coming up at like 3:30. So, and we had a lot of night shoots, and sometimes a lot of that was outside, so we just had a few hours to really get things going. And that was just really, that was what was hard about it, you know. Yeah, I mean, and, you know, we did nights in Tennessee, you know, both shoots as well, because anything that's nighttime, you switch as the days go, you start going later and later and later. Like in Alaska, we wouldn't be on set till 3 p.m., and then we'd wrap at 4 a.m. Then I would have dinner, and I'd be in bed by 5:30. I'd get up at 11 a.m. and start to prepare for the next day.
Oh, wow.
You know, and do that for like a week, you know.
Yeah.
It's pretty wacky.
Pretty
But,
intense.
yeah, we had, and then there was like the tides in Alaska were insane. So like we had this like cove area we're shooting at, and we needed to be right next to the water. But we went one time to see where it would be, same tide level. I'm like, okay, cool, we can shoot up here. That's looking awesome. When we show up that night to shoot, it's like 40 yards down the water. Like, okay, so let's go down here, start shooting the scene. Well, it goes another 20, 30 yards out. We keep going because we need to be right next to the water.
Yeah.
Then it chases us up almost 100 yards up the beach area. And then I didn't even, and it's weird because it was working on me, on my mind, and you know, just being stretched out as the water's coming, you know, at nighttime. You can't really see it, but you know, because people are, oh, I'm standing in water. Okay, they have to move up. But it's just pushing us up till where we're shooting the last moments. The sun's coming up again of this scene, and I look around, and we're standing on like an area that's about as big as this little kitchen part. We're completely surrounded by water. Like the C stands, like the legs of a C stand that hold the lights, we're underwater.
Oh man.
Yeah, I mean, and so when we got our stuff and went up, got out of that, we came back to do it just like once over, and of course there was nothing that wasn't underwater.
Oh wow.
I mean, it's so like shooting there was nuts. Yeah,
man.
Is this going to be kind of in the folk horror subgenre still? Or
yeah, it's folk horror for sure.
Yeah. Right on. Looking forward to it. Is there an ETA, or is it still kind of
No, we still have to shoot some more for it.
Yeah.
And I'm editing it right now, but we still have a shoot date, weekend basically, that has to happen. I'm not too sure when it will happen yet. So,
nice.
I mean, with every movie, it's like, you know, you shoot it, then you add it, and you're trying to get into festivals. So they would have been festivals that, you know, we have to be done by October to November, completely done to get like the first wave of festivals. Then it's like early spring, you know, so like it could possibly be in festivals the earliest, probably, you know, spring.
Around the corner.
Yeah.
Kind of.
Well, for us that just get to sit back and wait for it.
Right,
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Well, but then it's like it goes to festivals for a year.
Sure.
You know, like with Jugface, it was like, I guess it wasn't a full year, but I actually worldwide it did it for a year, you know, and so I got that. That's like the big reward of making a movie. You get to go to festivals, and particularly the ones in other countries treat you really well, fly you out there, pay for everything, and you meet other filmmakers and become best friends with people just like you know. Where, you know, it's really cool. But
Organ Grinder, holy shit! Have you ever thought about like? Is there any story to make that a full-length movie?
Which version have you seen?
I don't know. It was just one I saw on YouTube.
Okay, see, that's the edited version.
Oh, really? I need to see the unedited version.
The OG.
It's on, or I guess the initial Blu-ray for Jugface. It's on it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and that was, once I had written Jugface, I was like, okay, I think this will be a finalist. Now I need like a short to go with it, and I need something to catch people's attention. So
it caught mine.
I wrote this, you know, craziest story about a girl who basically screws demons out of guys, which I came up with the idea. I did a graphic novel called Harp, America's First Serial Killers, about the Harp brothers who were in Tennessee.
Oh, I don't know.
And yeah, it's a really wild story. But I did a graphic novel with an artist, Adam Shaw, and he was out of Memphis. And he had this in his studio. He had this like huge charcoal painting, drawing of like a guy laying in a bed, and the sheets are kind of messy, and the girl laid next to him, kind of curled up. And I thought, what's going on in this photo? I was like, she just screwed a demon out of him. I was like, that would be a good short premise,
Yeah.
And and so in the process of taking the demon out of them, it mutilates their genitalia.
Yeah.
And so hence the name Organ Grinder. And I just knew that would, and the crazy thing was, I won the award for Slam Dance. I'm talking to a producer the very next week who ended up making the movie, Andrew Vandenhouten. And he was like, okay, this is great, cool script. If you want to direct it, I need to see something that you've made. And I was like, okay, well, actually just give me a couple weeks, because this weekend I've been planning for 3 months to shoot a short. And I'm going to be making it in 3 days. So just give me time to edit and do whatever. And the day I sent him so that's like October. In November, when I finally finished it, sent it to Andrew. That's the day he told me, after watching it, okay, we're going to make this movie, and Lucky McKee is going to be the exec producer.
Yeah.
So it was that short that pushed it over until
because he's directed what, Offspring, and he's directed a few movies.
Headspace, maybe, I think so.
I think so, something like that. Yeah, I just remember Offspring was a big one that he did, the Jack Ketchum novel. Mm-hmm. What was it? So did you have, I know you said Lucky McKee, who I'm a huge fan of.
Yeah.
Did he have a big amount of involvement, or was just like a kind of like Wes Craven back in the day with being an executive producer?
A little bit. I mean, the production, it's funny because people were like, oh yeah, Lucky McKee's involved. You can totally tell. There's no way. He didn't have effects like that. I had never even met Lucky until the week before shooting, and we hung out in a hotel room and drank beers together and talked about movies. And it was great. I was like, okay. But he was just there on set the first week, which was it was so stressful. It was first feature, first week, Sean Young.
Yeah.
All the biggest scenes. She's only there for that week, so we had all the biggest scenes in the first week.
Yeah.
And then Lucky McKee's sitting in Video Village watching what I'm doing.
Oh, wow.
I couldn't even remember what had happened after that first week. Seriously, in the days too, I couldn't remember what we did in the morning. It's just so much, so intense. But anyway, so then he left, and then but during the editing, he would come down to El Paso, where the editor was, and where I would go, and we would spend it was one time we spent 1 or 2 weeks together. And the house we stayed in didn't have the internet or anything, and so we just had a big television. So we'd watch movies at night, would edit in the daytime, and with the
Sounds
editor.
amazing.
It's one of the best 2 weeks of my life.
Yeah.
And we would just talk about movies every night. Some nights we would just start drinking outside and talking, and we wouldn't even eat dinner. We'd forget to.
Were you ever just tempted to be like, hey, Lucky, can we just watch May? That'd be kind of cool.
No, I never watched it with him. I've seen it before, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, big fan of him before that. But yeah, it was great. This is a funny thing. Yeah, some nights we would smoke pot. But what was funny is I had 2 really weird dreams where I'm sleeping, and I wake up and I see a silhouette, and I swear to God, it's Lucky's silhouette.
Oh.
And it's like he's standing in the room with me, but I blink and he's not there. And I'm like, what the fuck? So the next morning...
I knew he was supernatural.
Yeah, next morning, I walked into his bedroom. I'm like, dude, were you standing in my room last night trying to scare me? He's like, what? No. And he said he totally didn't do it. Okay. So then the night or the next night, same thing. I'm asleep, and I start to open my eyes, and not standing in the middle of the room, but there was the bed, and there was a workout thing right next to it, and hiding next to the workout thing, looking right at me, crouched down, was the silhouette again.
Whoa.
Lucky. And I blinked and it wasn't there, and I was just like, oh my God.
That's wild.
It was wild. It was so trippy. But yeah, it was so much fun just to edit with him and then to talk movies and just life stuff. It was awesome.
Oh yeah, that sounds like a dream for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah, it was for sure. And he's one of my good friends now, and so I talk to him all the time.
That's awesome. What was it like? Because you brought her up. How did Sean Young get involved? What was it like working with her?
That was kind of funny. Andrew, the producer, knew her previously, had offered her the role in the other Ketchum movie, Girl Under the Stairs or something like that. Girl Next Door. What's that
the
one?
Girl Next Door.
Girl Next Door.
Yeah.
And she didn't take it. And she said that she regretted that. So then he sent her the script for Jugface, and she replied with, "What the hell is this?" and was not going to do it or whatever. And then she decided to do it. Because I had already thought, okay, she's not doing it, so we're looking at someone else. And then a month later, it's like, Andrew's like, no, she's in. I'm like, okay, cool. And I was nervous, Yeah, so then she was in. But then when she wrapped, they do like an interview, for like the documentary that they'll put on the disc. And she said that the only reason why she did the movie was because she had turned down the other role that Andrew had given her. And I was just like, what the hell? And like, what's funny is with all the actors and people you work with, you get to some sort of understanding about each other and how to communicate with each other. And we just locked heads. Like, I was not going to let her run over me. Yeah. And that's what she wanted. She wanted me to give in to her. I just wasn't going to do it. Yeah. So we never had a good relationship at all. Really? Yeah. And so at the end, like, we have the premiere at Slam Dance. So yeah, I won the award at Slam Dance. Came back the next year with the movie. That's never happened. Yeah. and so Sean Young's in the audience. She's because we've been doing press the whole week. It's Sundance and Slam Dance, so there's a ton of press. There's people waiting outside for Sean Young to sign autographs. It was like really cool. She looked amazing. She looked beautiful. She did great with all the interviews. Then the day came where the movie was going to play, and she looked wrecked. Her hair was all crazy. Her clothes didn't fit. And so anyway, we're watching the movie, and she jumped more than anyone else at the scary parts, which I thought was hilarious. And then afterwards, she didn't even say anything to me afterwards. She just left. Okay. She told Andrew, she said that she thought I was weird. But it was cool because I was like, oh man, like she's, two of my favorite directors she's worked with, David Lynch, you know, I mean.
Last person I'll bring up, and then I'm done.
No, I didn't mean to cut you off.
This is the Holler Kings podcast, so I gotta ask you about how you got involved with Larry Fessenden as well, because he comes up all the time on the podcast for us. Right. Just happenstance from your movies, or just like I was listening to the Tales from Beyond the Pale podcast, so he keeps coming up. So I was curious, how did you get involved with him?
Larry is one of my favorite people. That's another acquaintance of Andrew. I think he was in Offspring.
He may have been.
Yeah. So Andrew knew him. It's funny because like I don't know if I may have seen Habit like before college. I think I did in college. And then when I got to New York, of course, John Freitas, the guy, when I went there, he was, of course, always talking about Larry Fessenden and how he loved his movies, and had met him and knew him, a little bit. And so Larry was always on my brain. Of course, I was living in New York too.
Right.
And,
his stomping ground.
Yeah, exactly. And then Andrew just one day, the producer sent me an email and said, what do you think about Larry Fessenden for one of the roles of either Dwight or Sustin, the Potter or the dad? And I was just like, I got so excited. I was like, oh my God, this is going to be amazing. And the wild thing was that Sean Bridgers, who was in Deadwood and ended up playing Dwight, he had read it too and wanted to be Dwight. So I was just like, oh man, this is great. But I was like, yeah, maybe him for the dad. And he read it and just accepted it. So I was like, perfect. And that's just, Andrew knew him and he liked the script, and and he was like my favorite. I say he was my favorite thing during the Jugface shoot, just being with him. And the day that he left was a day before we had like an off day. And so we just spent the day together hanging out, talking movies, and then he left. And so, so I've wanted to put him in all my movies. So then when I did Dementer, so we kept in touch. I was like, oh, I have to. The character's name is Larry. Like, it was supposed to always be him. Yeah. And then this new movie, I wanted to play a role in that too, but it just wasn't going to work with his son's movie was coming out right when we were shooting, and he was helping with all that. But and he hates to fly, and so the idea of him flying to Alaska, he was like,
Well, okay, right. I'm done. I promise.
Well, I mean, thank you again for agreeing to do this.
Yes, thank you.
No
This was awesome.
Yeah,
Appreciate
definitely.
it. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.